They smile in your face, but behind closed doors, they plot in silence. Narcissists don't just dislike chosen ones, they see them as their greatest threat, their worst enemy. Why? Because the light inside you exposes everything they try to hide. This is not just a battle of personalities, it's a silent war between truth and deception, between authenticity and illusion. Every chosen one carries a purpose that narcissists cannot stand, and that makes you their target. But here's the twist. The very same things they use to attack you are the things that will destroy them in the end. Stay with me until the end of this video, because once you see all 9 reasons why narcissists secretly hate chosen ones, you'll never look at their behavior the same way again. And if you've ever felt this silent war in your own life, drop a comment below. Your story might give someone else the strength they need to fight back. Don't forget to subscribe, because together we are breaking the silence and exposing the truth they never want you to know. The shadow sees the light. This is the first truth we need to understand about why narcissists become the worst enemies of chosen ones. You see, narcissists don't hate chosen ones for what they do, for their actions, or even for their words. No, their hatred runs deeper than that. They despise chosen ones for what they are, living proof that light exists beyond the mask, that authenticity can't be faked, and that purity of spirit still survives in a world full of pretense. The presence of a chosen one is like a mirror the narcissist cannot escape from. Every time they stand near you, your light exposes the shadows they've carefully hidden from everyone else. It's not that you call them out directly. It's not that you openly accuse them of deceit. The truth is, you don't have to. Just by being yourself, honest, grounded, empathetic, and unwavering, you reveal everything they are not, and that is unbearable for them. Narcissists live behind masks of charm and manipulation. They build entire lives around illusions, fake kindness, false confidence, shallow love. These masks work on most people because most people see only what they are given. But chosen ones? They are different. They see through energy. They feel the weight of deception, even when it is dressed up as affection. A chosen one doesn't need proof or evidence. Their intuition tells them when something is false. And that is why narcissists cannot stand to be in their presence. It's like standing in the sunlight after years of hiding in a cave. Every flaw, every scar, every lie suddenly becomes visible. The narcissist doesn't want the truth to be seen. They want their story to be believed. And when someone quietly lives in such a way that the story collapses on its own, rage begins to grow inside them. Think of it this way. The chosen one is not fighting. They're not even trying to win. They are simply existing as who they were called to be. But to a narcissist, that very existence feels like an attack. Why? Because it reminds them of the one thing they will never have: authenticity. A narcissist can mimic kindness, but it will always be conditional. They can perform love, but it will always be conditional. They can pretend to have strength, but the moment life tests them, their mask begins to slip. And every time a narcissist is around a chosen one, they feel that contrast so sharply that it drives them into silent warfare. This is the shadow seeing the light. It is not a battle of fists or words, but of presence. One carries illusion, the other carries truth. One survives on deception, the other lives by integrity. And as long as both exist, the shadow will always hate the light, because light makes shadow powerless.
And that is why narcissists see chosen ones as their greatest enemy.
Your calm is their chaos. This is one of the deepest reasons why narcissists cannot stand the presence of chosen ones. It may sound strange at first. How could calmness ever be a threat? But to someone who thrives on noise, distraction, and control, the quiet stillness of a chosen one is unbearable. Chosen ones walk with a certain peace. It's not the peace of pretending everything is fine. It's not a mask to impress others. It's the peace that comes from knowing who you are, where you stand, and what you will not compromise. This stillness is not loud or dramatic, but it is powerful. And here's the truth: narcissists cannot sit in that kind of peace because their entire world is built on internal storms. Narcissists carry chaos inside them, a whirlwind of insecurity, shame, envy, and unhealed wounds they refuse to face. To keep that chaos hidden, they project it outward. They create arguments, they stir drama, they invent distractions, anything to avoid sitting alone with themselves. Now imagine what happens when such a person sits across from a chosen one, someone who doesn't rise to their bait, someone who doesn't feed into the drama, someone who remains calm when the storm is raging. That calmness doesn't soothe the narcissist. Instead, it exposes them. It forces them to realize that the storm they feel isn't coming from you. It's coming from within themselves. And that is a truth they are not prepared to face. This is why narcissists provoke. This is why they push buttons. They need you to break your stillness, to rise up in anger, to lose your balance. Because the moment you remain calm, the imbalance between you and them becomes undeniable. Your silence becomes a mirror of their noise. Your patience becomes proof of their lack of control. And the more you refuse to enter their storm, the more desperate they become to pull you in. It is not just about winning an argument. It is about survival for them. Because if they cannot drag you into chaos, they are left alone with their own. Chosen ones must understand this. Your calm is not weakness. It is power. It is the power that disarms manipulation, the power that diffuses arguments before they even begin, the power that makes lies fall flat because they find no reaction to cling to. Narcissists hate this power because they cannot imitate it. They can fake confidence, they can fake charm, they can fake compassion, but they cannot fake inner stillness. It is the one thing that cannot be copied because it comes from a place of truth, and truth is what they fear most. So when your calmness irritates someone, when your silence seems to make them angrier instead of bringing peace, remember this: it is not you who is wrong. It is their storm being revealed. To a narcissist, your calm is chaos because it strips away their illusions and leaves them face to face with the emptiness inside. And that is why they will always hate it.
Your calm is their chaos. This is one of the deepest reasons why narcissists cannot stand the presence of chosen ones. It may sound strange at first. How could calmness ever be a threat? But to someone who thrives on noise, distraction, and control, the quiet stillness of a chosen one is unbearable. Chosen ones walk with a certain peace. It's not the peace of pretending everything is fine. It's not a mask to impress others. It's the peace that comes from knowing who you are, where you stand, and what you will not compromise. This stillness is not loud or dramatic, but it is powerful. And here's the truth: narcissists cannot sit in that kind of peace because their entire world is built on internal storms, the mirror they can't shatter. Every chosen one carries the strange, unshakable gift They reflect truth back like a mirror. Not because they're trying to expose anyone, not because they're searching for flaws, but simply because of who they are. When a narcissist looks at most people, they can manipulate what is seen. They can break someone's confidence, distort their self-image, twist reality until the person no longer trusts themselves. That's their favorite weapon, control through distortion. But when they come face to face with a chosen one, something happens that they cannot stand. The reflection doesn't bend, the image doesn't shatter. No matter how much they attack, no matter how much they push, the chosen one's mirror keeps showing them exactly who they are. And that is unbearable for someone who spends their entire life hiding from themselves. This mirror is not made of glass, it's made of presence, of authenticity, of spiritual clarity. A chosen one carries an energy that naturally unmasks illusions. They don't have to speak harsh words or make accusations. Their very existence shines in such a way that lies collapse in front of them. When a narcissist sees themselves reflected in this mirror, they don't see the mask they show the world, they see the emptiness beneath it. They see the envy, the insecurity, the manipulations they've worked so hard to bury, and instead of inspiring them to change, it drives them into rage, because change would require humility, and humility is the one thing a narcissist will never embrace. So what do? They attack the mirror. They try to distort it, to scratch it, to throw stones at it, hoping that somehow the reflection will disappear. This is why narcissists insult chosen ones, why they spread rumors, why they mock or belittle. It's not really about the words they use, it's about silencing the reflection. If they can convince the chosen one to doubt themselves, then maybe, just maybe, the mirror will break. But here lies the frustration for them. It doesn't. The chosen one may hurt, may stumble, may even cry, but the mirror remains intact. The reflection continues to shine, and eventually, the narcissist is forced to confront a reality they cannot escape. The problem is not the mirror. The problem is the one staring into it. For the chosen one, this can feel like a curse to constantly trigger the hostility of those who fear truth, but in reality, it is one of their greatest strengths. Their presence awakens clarity, not only for the narcissist, but for everyone around them. People begin to see what was hidden. Masks fall, stories lose their power. And while the narcissist may rage, others begin to recognize the truth that has been there all along. This is why the mirror cannot be shattered, because it is not built on ego or performance, but on divine truth. And no matter how hard darkness tries, it cannot destroy what was created to reflect the light.
They study you like prey. Before a narcissist ever makes a move, they watch. This watching is not casual curiosity. It is calculation. They observe the way you smile, the small rituals you perform each morning, the phrases you use when you comfort someone, the moments where you let your guard down. To them, every habit is a data point, and every kindness is an opportunity. They do not study you to understand you. They study you to find the places where you can be broken, the soft spots where manipulation will stick the easiest. It feels clinical, like being under a magnifying glass. You may never notice the scrutiny at first because it is quiet and patient. Narcissists are experts at blending in, at performing interest, at pretending to admire. But the admiration is false. It is reconnaissance. This pattern of watching is terrifying because it turns your virtues into vulnerabilities. The things that make you gentle and reliable, your empathy, your generosity, your predictability, become the very hooks they use to control you. If you always forgive, they will push until forgiveness becomes a one-sided contract. If you always show up, they will begin to take your presence for granted and then demand more.
They mentally map your boundaries, then test them slowly, noting which lines you will cross and which you will defend. They catalog your relationships, learning who loves you and who doubts you, then work to rearrange those alliances so that you stand more alone. It is a strategic isolation, orchestrated by someone who has done their homework. Worse, this surveillance is disguised as care. A narcissist will ask thoughtful questions, remember trivial details, and refer back to them in ways that feel flattering. Later, those same details will be used to gaslight you or to craft lies that sound suspiciously true. That is why their interest feels like a knife that has been wrapped in velvet, soft to the touch, but cutting beneath the surface. And because their methods are patient, they often succeed before you realize you are a target. The slow drip of manipulation is more dangerous than a single blow because it becomes the new normal, and normal is what keeps you silent. But understanding this pattern gives you power. When you recognize the signs, the overly attentive questions, the sudden memory of small facts they should not care about, the way they test your limits with subtle requests, you can refuse to be a data set. You can change patterns, refuse automatic forgiveness, and set boundaries that are non-negotiable. You can document interactions, share concerns with trusted friends, and name observations out loud so they lose their secrecy. Most importantly, you can guard the parts of yourself that are most vulnerable. Your routines, your private rituals, the details you would rather keep sacred. Seen another way, their study reveals their fear. A person who must map your life before moving against you is someone who cannot engage honestly. They need a script because they do not trust their own heart. That realization strips away some of their power. When you no longer play by their expectations, their careful plans unravel. The prey becomes uncatchable, not by force, but by becoming unpredictable, by refusing to be read on autopilot. And that is the quiet rebellion that disarms the hunter. Simply choose to be whole, to change your rhythms, and to let your life remain partly unreadable.
The weakness of envy. This is a quiet, poisonous force that lives inside the narcissist, and when a chosen one walks into a room, that force wakes like a sleeping animal. Envy is not the same as simple dislike. It is a deep, gnawing recognition of something the narcissist cannot produce for themselves. Where you carry integrity, purpose, and a steady inner authority, they feel hollow and exposed. Your presence becomes a mirror that shows what career, compassion, faith, or courage they only pretend to have. That is why your very existence can trigger a dangerous, often hidden response. Because envy is not rational. It does not reason. It corrodes. When someone is used to being the center of attention, to controlling narratives and collecting praise, encountering a person whose light arrives without performance is unbearable. Suddenly, everything they have built on showmanship looks brittle, and their need to protect that illusion can turn into cruelty. Envy drives the narcissist to act in secretive, strategic ways. They may attempt to imitate you, to copy your habits and mimic your language, hoping that replication will fill the emptiness. Sometimes imitation is flattery, but with narcissists, it is a dressed-up form of theft, a hope that wearing your traits will allow them to claim your life's meaning. Other times, envy pushes them towards sabotage. Instead of raising their own standards, they try to lower yours. They whisper doubts, undermine achievements, and cast small but sharp stones aimed at your reputation or your confidence. These acts are not random. They are designed to shrink the person who makes them feel small.
It is easier to convince others you are superior if the person you fear looks diminished. What makes envy especially dangerous is its stealth. It rarely announces itself with grand declarations. Instead, it lives in micro-attacks, the backhanded compliment, the subtle comparison, the story told with a lie tucked between the lines. To the onlooker, it may appear petty, but to the target, it feels corrosive over time. Because chosen ones often give grace and assume goodwill, they may misread these moments, forgive too quickly, or attribute malice to stress rather than intent. That's exactly what the narcissist counts on. Your generosity becomes cover for their incremental theft of your peace. Understanding envy, however, removes some of its power. When you name it, when you see the pattern, the mimicry, the undermining, the sudden attempts to rewrite your achievements, it becomes less mystifying and more manageable. You can refuse to engage with attempts to bait you. You can document distortions, and you can celebrate your wins openly so there is less space for quiet sabotage. Perhaps most importantly, you can cultivate a life that is harder to envy, genuine relationships, clear boundaries, and a steady inner rhythm that does not need external applause. Remember, envy always points to lack in the one who feels it, not to failure in the one who experiences it. Your light does not create danger because it is wrong. It creates reaction because it is true. And when the shadow lashes out, it only proves what you already knew, that you are walking a path they cannot forge. Keep tending your light. It will outlast every small attempt to snuff it out.
Attacks without evidence. Narcissists are masters of the invisible battlefield. They prefer to strike in places where light struggles to reach, because in the shadows their lies multiply without being challenged. They rarely pick open fights. That would be too risky and too obvious. Instead, they specialize in whisper campaigns, subtle digs, and rumors that spread like slow poison through relationships and communities. These attacks are slick and patient. A sentence dropped at the right moment. A question phrased to seed doubt. A private comment retold as if it were public fact. Over time, the cumulative effect of these small, unverified strikes is what destroys credibility and corrodes trust. For the person targeted, often a chosen one whose integrity is obvious to those who truly know them, the experience can feel bewildering because there is no single dramatic incident to point to. The damage is done through repetition and suggestion, not through one headline event, and that makes it harder to confront. What makes these shadow attacks especially dangerous is that they leverage other people's assumptions and fears. A whisper about motives, unstated implications about loyalty, or a rephrased anecdote becomes a story that feeds on the most human tendencies: curiosity, gossip, and the desire to make sense of ambiguous behavior. As rumors travel, they mutate. Context is stripped away, intentions are questioned, and the original truth becomes a gray, flimsy thing. By the time the target realizes what is happening, the social map around them has shifted. Friends hesitate, colleagues offer cautious praise, and allies become uncertain. All of this happens without the narcissist ever needing to take responsibility. They remain outwardly charming or mysteriously absent, allowing the rumor to do the work while they claim plausible deniability. For those who are watched and whispered about,
The key to resisting this slow undermining is clarity and documentation. Silence is not always the best defense. Leaving painful things unaddressed allows the gossip to fill the vacuum. Naming the pattern calmly, asking for specifics when accusations appear, and bringing concerns into the open with trusted witnesses can interrupt the whisper's momentum. Transparency matters. Clear records, public timelines of events, and consistent truth-telling create friction for rumors that depend on ambiguity. Another powerful antidote is relational redundancy. Refuse to let your reputation live on the word of one or two people. Build multiple, varied relationships that can testify to your character, because a chorus of truth is harder to drown out than a single hiss. At the same time, resist the temptation to fight fire with fire. Responding to every small jab with equal venom hands the narrative back to the narcissist. It gives them the reactive footage they need to continue their campaign. Instead, act strategically. Protect what is private, correct what is false, and invest energy in steadying your circle. Remember that shadow attacks are often a measure of success. If they're being aimed at you, it's because your influence matters. That insight shifts the meaning. The whisper is not the truth about you, but a sign that you are seen as a threat to deception. Hold your life in the light you control, clear, consistent, and unwavering, and the rumors will lose the oxygen they need to spread.
When love becomes ammunition. Love is meant to heal, to steady, to hold. But to a narcissist, it becomes a weapon, a tool to be sharpened and thrown. The more you give from a place of abundance, the more they see openings where they can take without returning. They learn to read kindness as currency and patience as permission. What begins as tenderness slowly turns into expectation, then entitlement, and finally a quiet demand that you carry the burden of their mood, their image, their ego. Your empathy, once a bridge to connection, becomes their leash. They tighten it with compliments that arrive like promises, with grand gestures that always come with a cost, with apologies that sound sincere until they repeat the same harm. Over time, the pattern becomes a script. You forgive, you explain, you hold, while they grow bolder and your needs shrink into the background. This transformation is not always obvious at first because it hides under the softest phrases. "I need you" turns into "you belong to me." "I'm hurt" becomes a weapon to silence your boundaries. They rewrite loving language into obligations, and the very acts that once nourished you are reframed as debts you owe. A narcissist will thank you publicly and then punish you privately. They will show the world a curated version of your sacrifice while they erase it behind closed doors. That performance makes it harder for others to see the harm. Friends witness your generosity and assume your relationship is healthy, because on the surface it looks devoted. But devotion has been replaced by extraction. Your love fuels their image, and they profit from your goodwill while your emotional account goes into deficit. What makes this tactic so cruel is that it attacks your identity. Many chosen ones measure themselves by how much they can love, how deeply they can give, and when that capacity is turned against them, it feels like a betrayal of who they are. You begin to question whether your boundaries are unloving, whether your self-care is selfish. The narcissist counts on this confusion. They rely on your kindness to keep justifying their behavior, And because you are wired to heal, you often keep trying to fix what cannot be fixed with more love. But love is not a binding contract to tolerate abuse. It is a sacred choice that requires reciprocity. When that reciprocity is absent, what remains is not love, but supply, emotional fuel for someone else's survival. Breaking free from this pattern requires a reframing. Recognize that the problem is not your capacity to love, it is the other person's refusal to receive love without using it as a weapon. Practice translating tenderness into boundaries. Giving can coexist with limits, and empathy can coexist with clear expectations. Learn to say no without guilt, to rest without apology, and to expect that caring relationships will replenish rather than drain you. Surround yourself with people who reflect your generosity back to you in honest ways, and let go of the shame that keeps you offering love as payment for acceptance. In the end, when love becomes ammunition, the answer is not to harden your heart, but to guard it. Preserve the part of you that loves freely by choosing where to invest it. Love that heals will find its home. Love that is twisted into a weapon will reveal itself by its emptiness. Hold your tenderness like a lamp. Protect it, guide it, and never let it be used as another person's tool for control.
They fear your future. To a narcissist, the present moment is never enough to control. Their eyes are always scanning ahead, searching for the future you are destined to grow into. And when you are a chosen one, that future radiates before you even realize it yourself. They sense it, sometimes even before you do. They see the quiet strength that will one day become unshakable, the seeds of influence that will blossom into leadership, the resilience that will turn wounds into wisdom. And this terrifies them because their power relies on keeping you small, trapped, and unaware of your true potential. It's not your present they seek to destroy. It's the future they know you are walking toward. That is why their attacks often feel disproportionate to your current reality. You may still be struggling, unsure of your path, doubting yourself, or piecing your life back together. Yet their hostility comes as if you're already standing on a mountain. They undermine you before you rise, plant doubts before you decide, and create obstacles before you even take your first steps. They are not reacting to who you are today. They are reacting to the vision of who you will become. To them, every small victory you achieve is a threat. Every spark of growth is a warning sign. Every step forward is a countdown to their eventual irrelevance. This is why narcissists often cling so tightly in the beginning. They study you, flatter you, mirror your strengths, and position themselves close, not just to feed on your present energy, but to try to chain themselves to your future. They want to either sabotage your destiny or claim credit for it. If you succeed, they want the world to believe it was because of them. If you fail, they want the world to believe it was in spite of them. Either way, their goal is to distort the story of your life so your future cannot outshine their shadow. But here is the truth they cannot erase. Destiny is not easily destroyed. A chosen one's path may be delayed, detoured, or littered with obstacles, but it cannot be stolen. Their attempts to sabotage your progress often become the very training ground that strengthens you. The betrayals that were meant to break you refine your discernment. The slander meant to silence you sharpens your voice. The envy meant to paralyze you ignites your drive. Every trap they set becomes a step in the staircase of your growth. And so their fear becomes prophecy. In trying to prevent your rise, they ensure it. In trying to silence your voice, they amplify it. In trying to cloud your vision, they clarify it. Because the future they fear is not built by their approval. It is written by your persistence, your faith, and the light that cannot be hidden. Narcissists may sense your destiny before you do, but they cannot stop it. The very fact that they fear it is proof that it is real and that you are closer to it than you realize.
The mask cracks in your presence. Around chosen ones, narcissists slip. Their fake smile trembles, and their carefully constructed act falters, because truth unsettles lies in a way that noise and force never can. This is rarely a spectacle. It is quieter, a glance that lingers too long, a joke that lands oddly, a pause where charm used to be, and yet it is one of the most devastating outcomes for the person who depends on performance. Narcissists build realities through repetition. The right phrases, the right victims, the right displays repeated until everyone accepts the fiction. Those patterns require cooperation, either active or passive, from the people around them. A chosen one's steady presence withdraws that cooperation without drama. Simply by being anchored, they change what others expect, and the illusion begins to wobble. Performance demands energy, and energy is finite. A narcissist must keep score constantly. Which stories to tell, which details to omit, who to flatter, which memories to rewrite. Around a chosen one, these calculations become harder. The truth that leaks from quiet integrity draws attention to inconsistencies that once passed unnoticed. The narcissist may compensate with louder displays, exaggerated gifts, grand declarations, a sudden barrage of compliments, anything to patch the fracture. But overcompensation is a giveaway. It highlights the very insecurity the mask was meant to hide. In other cases, the performer resorts to narrative contortions, retelling events with such selective detail that the account becomes an alternate reality. That rewriting can work for a while, but it requires a growing set of lies to remain coherent, and the more lies, the more vulnerable the structure becomes to a single steady light. There is an ethical dimension to the crack as well. Chosen ones typically live by a standard that is not performative, but rooted. They carry an inner measure of truth that informs their words and actions, often without intent to expose others. This grounded manner acts like a quiet lamp in a dim room. Suddenly, dust motes, cracks, and peeling paint become visible. People who have relied on appearances prefer the darkness. They feel exposed, and sometimes push back. But once one person refuses to sustain a false story, others begin to notice, and collective memory starts to realign around what actually happened. Of course, the person wearing the mask may escalate. Many narcissists react to exposure with denials, with gaslighting, with charm turned sharp. They discredit the witness, suggest motive, and summon allies to corroborate an alternate version. That counterattack can be effective, and often is, because social systems reward consistency and punish disruption. Those who speak may be labeled as troublemakers, and the mask wearer can use public favor to bury truth. That is why the crack is dangerous, and why those who see it must act with care. Psychologically, the cracking also reveals a weakness. Narcissists are actors, not learners. They do not process internal truth through reflection. Instead, they manage impressions. When caught without a script, they lack the tools to respond with vulnerability, so they improvise with greater distance from reality. Their emotions may become theatrically amplified or eerily flat. They may accuse instead of apologizing, deflect instead of owning, and manipulate instead of listening. In that improv, they become more obvious and mistakes multiply. But the most significant consequence of the mask cracking is communal clarity. One exposed seam invites verification, and verification invites collective memory to be compared against the claimed story. Witnesses begin to line up not because they want to punish, but because they want coherence.
A reputation built on selective truth requires constant maintenance. Every diversion, every lie must be supported by another. When the patchwork unravels, the pattern that once seemed plausible becomes visibly strained. For the chosen one, the cracking can feel heavy. They may be blamed for revealing what others prefer hidden. They may be exhausted by the moral responsibility that presence carries. Yet this effect is not punishment for kindness. It is a consequence of living in line with a deeper truth. The chosen one's role is not to prosecute, but to be steady, to embody clarity so others can orient themselves. That steadiness is contagious. It normalizes authenticity and gradually raises the cost of pretense for everyone nearby. There is also a fragile possibility in the crack. Some people, when confronted with undeniable reflection, choose to stop performing and begin the painful work of self-knowledge. Few do so consistently, and fewer still sustain that work. But real repair can happen when accountability meets humility. Repair of that kind does not restore the old mask. It creates a new, honest shape built on truth rather than spectacle. In the end, the mask cracks in your presence, not because you set out to shatter it, but because you simply refuse to pretend. You live with a steadiness that makes pretense costly and inconsistency visible. The crack is both a symptom and a beginning. A symptom of someone's long effort to be something they are not, and a beginning of reckoning. For individuals, for relationships, and sometimes for entire communities. Stay steady, let truth do its quiet work, and know that when a mask trembles in the light, what follows is not always punishment, but the chance for a clearer, saner world. Your presence is not accusation. It is a living, gentle witness.
Your silence burns louder. Walking away is not a dramatic exit for the sake of drama. It is a quiet, final sentence that a narcissist cannot rewrite. To them, every argument, every accusation, every performance depends on fuel, attention, reaction, the slightest crack of your armor. When you respond, they have life. When you engage, they can spin the story, control the scene, and harvest the emotional harvest they crave. Silence, and especially the act of leaving, removes that harvest. It is not emptiness to them, it is calamity. Imagine a stage where the actor expects a crowd, applause, boos, any noise at all. The actor will adjust, pivot, play harder to get the reaction. But if the house remains dead silent, the performer begins to tremble. That tremble is not theatrical, it is the reveal of dependence. A narcissist's bravado is built on your echoes. Take those echoes away, and the bravado dissolves. Walking away is more than a physical leaving. It is the disciplined refusal to be baited, the steady decision to protect your boundaries and your energy. It communicates something they cannot tolerate, your sovereignty. In 1,000 small ways, your silence says, I will not be your weather vane. I will not pivot for your storms. That statement, made without spectacle, lands harder than any heated rebuttal because it removes the battleground. Without a battlefield, their weapons, the stories, the guilt, the public performance have no target. And when the target is gone, their narrative stops making sense. People who relied on the drama to understand the relationship suddenly have nothing to interpret. Rumors lose their momentum without reaction to feed them. Friends who once paused at the rumor begin to watch behavior instead of headlines. Your leaving is an unarguable data point. You chose yourself over the script they wrote. For the narcissist, silence is humiliation in slow motion.
They are forced into a private space where they must reckon with the simple fact that their methods no longer work. They cannot meaningfully punish you from a distance without inventing louder, clumsier performances that look desperate rather than majestic. They may escalate, calling, messaging, creating scenes in public, but those attempts often expose the very insecurity they were hiding. The more they try, the more obvious it becomes that their power dwindles when you refuse to feed it. This is why they sometimes attempt to manufacture crises or to tarnish your reputation after you go. It is the last resort of someone reliant on control. But even those efforts carry a hollow sound because they ring out into a space where your presence, and therefore your reaction, is absent. In time, the echo fades. There is also a moral clarity to silence. When you disengage calmly and consistently, you preserve your dignity in a way that reactive behavior rarely does. Anger can be righteous, and confrontation can be necessary. But when the goal is to reclaim peace and safety, silence often does more. It allows you to conserve your energy for building a life that is not defined by defending yourself. It signals to others that your story is not negotiable. It invites onlookers to observe rather than to choose sides based on spectacle. In that quiet observation, truth has room to breathe. People who were uncertain begin to notice patterns rather than moments. They see the consistency of your integrity against the inconsistency of the other person's stagecraft. Silence is also strategic because it creates space for healing. Walking away severs the immediate cycle of supply and demand. Without the constant need to respond, you can rebuild your rhythm, reconnect with your wisdom, and repair what was depleted. That inward work is the ultimate consequence for the narcissist. They lose the person who once provided their emotional sustenance, and they are left to face themselves without a script. Facing oneself without costume is terrifying for someone who has never practiced that kind of honesty. For those of us who choose silence, the act is not a surrender, but a reclaiming, a way to show that our life will not be curated to feed someone else's hunger. So, when your silence burns louder, understand its power. It is not cruelty. It is a boundary that preserves what matters. It is a calm that exposes dependency, a withdrawal that exposes weakness, and a quiet that invites clarity. Let your leaving be simple, dignified, and unwavering, and trust that in that absence, the truth will make more noise than any argument ever could.
A narcissist's greatest nightmare is not rejection, not failure, not even being disliked. Their greatest nightmare is exposure. Beneath every performance, every carefully rehearsed smile, every story designed to impress, lives the desperate fear that someone will see behind the curtain. And when a chosen one enters their world, that fear begins to materialize. Not because the chosen one sets out to destroy them, but because authenticity itself acts like a light that no mask can withstand. The narcissist thrives in spaces where image is mistaken for reality, where words count more than character, where performance passes as substance. But a chosen one does not buy the performance. They see with different eyes. They carry an inner compass that points to truth without needing evidence, and in their presence, the false layers of charm and control begin to crumble. This is the curse of exposure, to be seen without the mask. What makes this so unbearable for a narcissist is that exposure is not just about being caught in a lie. It is about being seen in the fullness of their emptiness.
The mask is not decoration, it is survival. It covers wounds, insecurities, and hollowness so deep that even the narcissist cannot look at it for long. They rely on convincing others to play along, to accept the mask as the person so they never have to face themselves. When a chosen one refuses to participate in that illusion, it forces reality to the surface. The smile doesn't land the same way. The story doesn't sound convincing. The manipulation doesn't stick. It is not that the narcissist suddenly becomes powerless, but that the power they relied on, the silent agreement of the crowd, is no longer secure. That loss of control feels like suffocation to them. Exposure also threatens their most valuable resource, reputation. Narcissists depend on public perception like oxygen. They need admiration, respect, and at the very least, compliance. But when a chosen one's presence brings authenticity into the room, others start to notice inconsistencies. They begin to question stories they once accepted, to rethink events that never quite added up. Exposure spreads like ripples in water. It doesn't always come in loud accusations. Often it begins as doubt, a raised eyebrow, a whispered conversation, a subtle shift in trust. The narcissist senses this shift immediately because they are hyper-attuned to control. And once they feel it slipping, panic sets in. That panic often shows up as rage, deflection, or desperate attempts to discredit the chosen one. Ironically, these attempts to fight exposure only accelerate it. The more they scramble to patch the mask, the more obvious the cracks become. They might smear the chosen one's name, launch whisper campaigns, or exaggerate their own virtue in public. But overcompensation always has a scent of desperation. People may not recognize it instantly, but over time, the act becomes harder to believe. Exposure is rarely a single moment. It is a process. And the narcissist's fear-driven reactions often provide the very evidence they were trying to hide. Their attempt to control the narrative ends up confirming the truth. For the chosen one, this curse of exposure can feel both a burden and a calling. It is not easy to be the one who sees what others don't want to see. It can feel isolating to hold the knowledge that the charming leader, the perfect friend, or the devoted partner is wearing a mask. At times, the chosen one may even wish they could unsee it, to go back to believing the illusion, because the responsibility of clarity is heavy. But authenticity cannot be undone. Once you see the mask slip, you cannot forget it, and though it may cost relationships, reputations, or peace in the short term, it also carries a strange kind of liberation. The exposure reveals that the problem was never your intuition, never your perception, never your worth. The problem was always the mask. The curse of exposure also transforms the chosen one. Standing in truth when deception is easier requires courage. Refusing to participate in lies teaches discipline. And enduring the backlash of a narcissist's retaliation builds resilience. What was meant to intimidate you becomes training for your purpose. What was meant to silence you strengthens your voice. What was meant to isolate you connects you with others who have walked the same road. Exposure does not only reveal the narcissist's weakness, it also reveals the chosen one's strength. But perhaps the most powerful part of this curse is that exposure is not always loud. It doesn't always look like confrontation or dramatic unmasking. Sometimes it is as simple as the chosen one living so authentically, so consistently, that the contrast itself becomes undeniable. While the narcissist scrambles to maintain an image, the chosen one embodies reality. While the narcissist edits his story, the chosen one speaks plainly. While the narcissist shifts like a chameleon, the chosen one stands steady. Over time, people recognize which voice rings true. They may resist it at first, but truth has a way of settling deep into the human spirit, and no amount of performance can outlast it. Exposure is, in the end, not the destruction of the narcissist by the chosen one. It is the destruction of illusion by truth. The chosen one does not need to fight, to argue, or to unmask with force. Their authenticity is enough. Their light makes shadows visible. Their steadiness makes masks tremble. The narcissist will rage against this reality, but rage cannot undo it. Once seen, truth cannot be unseen. Once revealed, masks cannot be reattached without looking absurd. The curse of exposure is also the gift of clarity, painful, costly, and yet utterly necessary for freedom.
The divine reversal. There is a strange and steady law that seems to govern the lives of those who live by manipulation. The very snares they set for others become the rope that binds them. When a narcissist schemes to dim your light, to derail your purpose, or to rewrite your story, they are manufacturing momentum that will eventually travel in a circle. At first, their plots feel frighteningly effective. Rumors spread, alliances shift, projects stall, and you may find yourself stumbling through unexpected setbacks. But beneath the surface, another force is quietly working, the slow arithmetic of truth, consequence, and human response. The divine reversal is not a mystical promise that absolves action. It is an unfolding pattern in which the energy invested in cruelty, deceit, and control returns to its source, misaligned and corrosive. What was meant to topple you instead undermines the very structure that created it. Consider how a trap is engineered. It depends on secrecy, on manipulation, and on an audience that will read the story the trapper wants them to read. The narcissist gathers allies who will amplify a narrative. They rearrange facts to create plausible lies, and they cultivate just enough doubt to make people hesitate. For a while, this can look like power, but power that needs constant fabrication is precarious. The effort to maintain the lie consumes attention and inventiveness. The narcissist must constantly remember which version of events was told to whom, recheck who has been flattered and who has been isolated, and invent new deceptions to patch holes. That labor creates fatigue, contradictions, and eventually visible strain. The first domino in a reversal is the cognitive load. The more fabrications you manage, the easier it is to trip. A misplaced detail, a resentful witness, or an unexpected corroboration can pierce the story. When the patchwork fails, the trap not only stops working, it becomes evidence of intent. There is also a moral geometry to this reversal. Manipulation requires vulnerability from others, their trust, their time, their testimonies. When a narcissist harvests these resources for false ends, they slowly hollow out the relational capital that sustains them. People begin to notice patterns, favors that come with cost, apologies that repeat offenses, stories that don't line up. Those who were once willing to supply the illusion may grow tired or ashamed of being complicit. Allies distance themselves, not necessarily because they suddenly see you as innocent, but because maintaining the facade becomes ethically and emotionally costly. As the social fabric frays, the narcissist finds their network thinning in the exact places they depended upon. The trap that required a chorus of compliance now rings hollow in a shrinking room.
practical errors accelerate the fall. In the pursuit of control, narcissists often overreach. They manufacture evidence, exaggerate slights, or attempt to micromanage outcomes in ways that escalate conflict rather than resolve it. Each overreach invites scrutiny. Each public performance to salvage private deception looks desperate and amplifies the original dissonance. The community observes not only that something is off, but that the person trying to correct it behaves irrationally. People distrust frantic defense more than quiet confidence. Thus, the very energy expended to conceal becomes the spotlight that reveals the concealment. There is also a spiritual dimension to this reversal, though it need not be couched in religious language to matter. Actions have consequences. Patterns of harm tend to perpetuate until met with accountability, and accountability emerges not only through formal structures, but through the ordinary mechanics of life. Relationships sour, opportunities dry up, and a reputation built on performance rots from the inside. The narcissist's short-term gain is often purchased at long-term cost. They may succeed in slowing your rise, but in doing so, they also erode their own capacity for real connection, meaningful work, and the kind of reliability that creates lasting influence. Over time, what they could have built with honest labor collapses beneath the weight of the shortcuts they took. For the chosen one, witnessing this reversal can be confusing and painful. You may still feel the sting of the attack long after the narcissist begins to unravel. Recovery is not instantaneous, yet there is comfort in seeing cause and effect align. Recognize that the reversal does not absolve you of agency. It simply shifts the moral and practical balance. You still must protect your boundaries, document harms, and rebuild what was damaged. But you can also take a steadier breath, knowing that the force arrayed against you contains its own undoing. The slow justice of returned energy is not vindictive. It is corrective. It makes space for repair, truth-telling, and the reorientation of community memory toward what actually happened. There is also a lesson in strategy here. When you understand how the divine reversal works, you can avoid feeding the narcissist's machine. Refuse to be bait. Keep records. Seek witnesses. Call out patterns calmly rather than react emotionally. When you do these things, you hasten the moment when contradictions surface and the trap loses steam. Your clarity and consistency are the accelerants of the reversal. You do not need to orchestrate revenge. Simple, steady truth-telling often does the job more cleanly than any dramatized exposure. Finally, remember that reversals can lead to change, not only for you, but for those around you. Some will wake up and choose differently. Some will leave the narcissist's orbit. Some may seek repair, though change without humility is rare. The more common outcome is that the narcissist's plans backfire in ways that force them to face consequences they tried to avoid. In that meeting with consequence, you may witness a painful unraveling or the beginning of a lonely accountability. Either way, the circle closes. The energy aimed at harm returns to its origin, and in that returning, it often exposes a truth the narcissist could not bear to see. Their control was always borrowed, and without it, they are left to confront what they have become. The divine reversal is not magic, but pattern, a steady reminder that actions create ripples, and those ripples, sooner or later, come home.